I remember a time when my world felt small, compressed into the desperate hope of a future that was never truly mine. It was a time I don't look back on with bitterness, but with a quiet understanding of the fire that forged me. My story isn't one of theatrical outbursts or tear-soaked pleas. No, when I say I don't do screaming matches or begging after being disrespected, I mean it with every fiber of my being. My journey to reclaiming my dignity wasn't a sudden explosion, but a meticulously planned campaign, fought on a battlefield of my own choosing. It began with an ache, deep and profound, that slowly transformed into an unshakable resolve. My name is Eleanor Vance, and I was 21 years old, living a life that felt both full of promise and quietly predictable in Willow Creek, Oregon. Our town was a tapestry of towering fir trees and gentle streams, a place where the scent of pine needles lingered in the air, and the rhythm of life felt slower, more intentional. I'd grown up knowing the names of nearly everyone on Main Street, finding comfort in the familiar faces and the unspoken understanding that stitched our community together. My days were a blend of working part-time at the local bookstore, where the scent of old paper was a constant comfort, and taking online classes towards my degree in environmental science. I envisioned a future rooted in stewardship, protecting the very natural beauty that surrounded me. I was a quiet person, observant, someone who preferred the company of a good book to a noisy party, but I also held a deep conviction about fairness and truth. I believed in the inherent goodness of people, perhaps a little too much, which made the unraveling of my most significant relationship all the more disorienting. His name was Ethan, and we had met back in high school. He possessed a kind of effortless charisma that drew people in, a quick smile and an easy laugh that could light up a room. We clicked instantly, or so I thought. He was the kind of person who seemed to see me, truly see the quiet girl who loved science and words, and for a long time, that felt like everything. Our relationship blossomed through senior year, filled with the usual teenage dreams and promises. But when he left for college, a state away, that's when the cracks began to show. The transition to a long-distance relationship was tough, as it always is. Hours of video calls, late-night texts, and carefully planned visits became our new normal. I tried my best to make it work, to bridge the miles with unwavering commitment, believing that our connection was strong enough to withstand the distance. But the distance didn't just separate our bodies. It seemed to magnify every subtle shift in Ethan's personality. Slowly, insidiously, the charm I'd fallen for began to sour. The loving words became tinged with criticism, disguised as concern. "You're too sensitive, Eleanor," he'd say, whenever I expressed hurt over a dismissive comment. "You're reading too much into things. Can't you just lighten up?" His tone would be calm, almost pitying, making me feel as though my emotions were an inconvenience, a burden. He would twist my words until I barely recognized them, turning my genuine feelings into accusations against him. If I mentioned feeling neglected, he'd respond with, "I can't believe you're saying that after all I do for you. It's like you're trying to pick a fight." I would immediately retreat, apologizing, convinced that I truly was the problem, that I was being unfair or unreasonable. He called it just being honest, but it felt like a constant chipping away at my self-worth. His cruelty wasn't overt. It was a slow poison. He'd make snide remarks about my dreams, about my quiet nature, framing them as weaknesses. "Are you sure you want to bury yourself in books your whole life, Eleanor? Don't you want to actually experience things?" he'd ask, making my passions feel small and insignificant. He would constantly undermine my decisions, subtly implying that his way was always the right way, the smarter way. Whenever I shared an accomplishment, like a good grade on a challenging paper or a successful shift at the bookstore, he'd either downplay it or pivot the conversation back to himself. "That's nice, but you should have seen the exam I just aced." Or, "Speaking of work, my fraternity just pulled off the biggest fundraiser on campus." It left me feeling invisible, as though my existence was merely a backdrop for his achievements. The gaslighting was the most insidious. He'd deny things he'd said moments before, making me doubt my own memory, my own sanity. "I never told you that, Eleanor. Are you sure you're remembering correctly?" he'd say with a calm, almost patient voice, even when I had text messages or a vivid recollection of the conversation. I started second-guessing everything, constantly replaying our interactions in my mind, searching for proof that I wasn't losing my grip on reality. He fostered an atmosphere where my perspective was always wrong, my feelings invalid, and my concerns baseless. I walked on eggshells, constantly censoring myself, terrified of sparking his disapproval. He had become the center of my universe, and I was so desperate for his approval that I barely recognized the intelligent, independent woman I used to be. My world, once vibrant and full of quiet purpose, felt increasingly dim, shadowed by his constant critiques and dismissals. Then came the subtle shifts, the telltale signs that something more was amiss. His calls grew less frequent, his texts shorter and more distracted. He'd often forget to call when he said he would, or claim he was too busy when I knew his schedule usually allowed for a quick chat. When I asked about it, he'd grow defensive, lashing out with accusations of distrust. "Why are you always so suspicious, Eleanor? Do you really think I don't want to talk to you? I have a life here, you know." He painted me as the controlling, paranoid girlfriend, twisting my genuine concerns into flaws in my character. He told me he'd turned off his location sharing on his phone for privacy, a perfectly reasonable request, he insisted, but I felt a prickle of unease. He was so careful about his digital footprint around me, always making sure our calls were private, never letting me see his screen. I tried to dismiss my gut feelings, telling myself it was just the distance, just my anxiety, just me being too sensitive again. The gnawing suspicion became a constant companion, a dull ache in my chest that wouldn't go away. I'd try to bring it up gently, rationally, but he would always shut me down. "You're always so negative, Eleanor. Can't you just be happy for once?" he'd retort, making me feel guilty for even voicing my worries. He always had an excuse, a plausible reason, a way to make me feel foolish for questioning him. He was a master of evasion, a chameleon of convenience. I started to notice small things that didn't quite add up. A fleeting comment from a mutual friend about seeing him out late with a group of girls, a quick glance at his phone that showed unfamiliar names in his recent calls before he quickly tucked it away. My heart would pound, my hands would tremble, but I would force a smile, pretending everything was fine, because questioning him meant another argument, another round of him gaslighting me into believing I was the problem. The final straw wasn't a dramatic confrontation or an overheard confession. It was a digital breadcrumb, innocuous to him, but a devastating revelation to me. I was scrolling through my social media feed one quiet evening, the kind of evening when the only sound was the gentle patter of rain against my window in Willow Creek. A story from a friend popped up, someone loosely connected to Ethan's college town. It was a picture, blurry and casual, taken at a campus bar I knew he frequented. And there he was, laughing, his arm casually draped around a girl I didn't recognize. Her face was turned away, but her posture, the way she leaned into him, spoke volumes. My breath hitched. It wasn't the image itself that shattered me. It was the familiarity of the scene, the casual intimacy, the blatant disregard for me. My mind immediately flashed back to all the late-night calls he'd skipped, all the study sessions he'd been on, all the times he'd told me I was being too sensitive for even wondering where he was. The anger wasn't a raging fire. It was a cold, piercing ice. It wasn't just about the cheating. It was about every lie, every gaslit conversation, every moment he'd made me doubt myself. It was the culmination of months, years, of emotional and verbal abuse, wrapped up in the devastating package of infidelity. In that instant, something shifted within me. The pain was still there, a raw, throbbing wound, but it was quickly overshadowed by a fierce, undeniable clarity. There would be no screaming, no begging, no desperate pleas for explanation or apology. That wasn't who I was. I had given him enough of my tears, enough of my energy trying to fix something that was rotten at its core. I closed my laptop. The image seared into my mind and sat in the quiet of my room, the rain outside mirroring the stillness within me. My heart ached, but my mind, surprisingly, felt sharp, focused. I realized that for too long I had let him define my worth, dictate my emotions, and control my narrative. This betrayal, this ultimate disrespect, was not an ending. It was a beginning of reclaiming myself, of building back the strong, confident Eleanor I had lost somewhere along the way. I knew, with an absolute certainty, that a dramatic breakup, a confrontation filled with tears and accusations, would only feed his manipulative ego. He thrived on drama, on making others feel chaotic and irrational while he remained cool and collected. I wouldn't give him that satisfaction. I wanted something deeper, something that would resonate with the profound psychological damage he had inflicted on me. I wanted him haunted, not by a ghost, but by his own conscience, by the inescapable truth of his actions. I wanted him to unravel, not because I stood screaming at him, but because he would be forced to face the consequences of his own deceit, unprovoked by my emotional outburst. My revenge wouldn't be about petty spite. It would be about a profound recalibration of power, a dignified assertion of my own boundaries and worth. It would be a journey of personal growth, a quiet revolution that started with me. I wasn't interested in destroying him, not truly. I was interested in disarming him, in ensuring he could no longer inflict such pain on others, and most importantly, in freeing myself from the emotional chains he had forged. This wasn't about revenge in the traditional sense. It was about justice, about an internal reckoning for him, and an external liberation for me. The next morning, I woke up with a strange sense of calm. The dull ache was still there, but it was overlaid with a thrilling sense of purpose. I opened my laptop again, not to cry or agonize, but to work. This wasn't a spontaneous outburst. It was a calculated campaign. I started by opening a new encrypted document on my computer, labeling it simply Project Clarity. This was my case file, my meticulously organized record of his deception. I became a detective, fueled not by hatred, but by a quiet, unwavering resolve. I paid attention to everything, every tiny detail that had once slipped past me in my haze of self-doubt. The names of girls he followed on Instagram, especially the new ones. The locations he popped up at on SnapMap, that careless detail he'd overlooked when he turned off his actual location for me. He was so careful about privacy with me, but evidently, not with his broader social circle. I began cross-referencing, noting down the names of bars and hangout spots around his campus, places I'd seen him mention in passing, or subtly spotted in the background of a friend's social media post. I memorized names, faces, and locations. I saved screenshots, copied links, and scribbled notes in a small, discreet notebook. Every casual comment he'd made, every fleeting mention of a friend or an event, I cross-referenced and cataloged. This wasn't just collecting information. It was reconstructing the truth, piece by painstaking piece. The process was surprisingly therapeutic. Each piece of evidence I gathered, each new discovery about his hidden life, chipped away at the illusion he had so carefully constructed, and in turn, rebuilt my own sense of reality. The confusion that had plagued me for months began to dissipate, replaced by a cold, clear understanding. He hadn't been busy. He had been with other women. He hadn't been forgetful. He had been deceitful. He hadn't been too busy. He had been lying. The puzzle pieces, once scattered and meaningless, were now forming a coherent, ugly picture. And I, Eleanor Vance, the quiet girl from Willow Creek, was assembling it with precision and unwavering focus. I was building a case file like a seasoned detective, and as I meticulously collected the evidence, a strange sense of empowerment washed over me. I wasn't just a victim, I was an architect of consequence. The fun part, the real beginning of the haunting, was yet to come, but I was ready. The initial shock had long since faded, leaving behind a cold, hard knot of resolve in my stomach. The tears had dried, leaving a bitter residue, but also a stark, unwavering clarity. I wasn't going to beg, I wasn't going to scream, and I certainly wasn't going to engage in another one of his dramatic performances, where he would twist my words, gaslight my emotions, and ultimately make me feel like the one at fault. He loved the chaos, the arguments, the tears. He fed on the emotional turmoil he created. I wouldn't give him that satisfaction ever again. This wasn't just about his cheating. It was about the years he had systematically eroded my confidence, making me question my own sanity, making me feel small and insignificant. It was about reclaiming the self he had tried to dismantle. I became a shadow, a silent observer in the digital ether. My laptop was my war room, the screen my battlefield, filled with the damning evidence I was meticulously assembling. Snap Map, the innocuous social media feature, was his unwitting betrayer. He thought he was clever, turning off his location for me. But the ghost of his presence lingered on that map, a digital breadcrumb trail leading right to his deceit. I'd zoom in, noting the clusters of activity, cross-referencing names and faces I recognized from his social media. Every name was a nail in his coffin, a piece of the puzzle I was diligently collecting. I saved screenshots of his followers' lists, noting the new additions, especially the girls with the smiling selfies and the campus geotags. I memorized the names of his new frat brothers, the bars he frequented, even the specific coffee shop near his dorm. I could have drawn a map of his daily routines, even though I was 1,000 miles away in Willow Creek, Oregon. My phone, usually a source of anxiety with his unpredictable texts, became a tool of quiet power. I scrolled through mutual friends' posts, picking up clues, noting who was with whom, when, and where. Each piece of evidence was a fresh wound, a sharp reminder of his betrayal, but also a surge of power. I was no longer the one being fooled. I was the one pulling the strings, a silent, unseen architect of his impending unraveling. The planning took months, a slow, methodical accumulation of data. It was chilling how easy it was, how much information people willingly broadcast about their lives. I didn't need to hire a private investigator. I just needed to pay attention, to connect the dots he carelessly left scattered across the internet. There were moments when a wave of nausea would wash over me, the sheer volume of his deceit overwhelming, but then a deeper current, one of quiet fury, would push me forward. This wasn't just revenge. It was an archaeological dig into the ruins of my relationship, unearthing every lie, every manipulation, every moment he had stolen my peace of mind. Then came the fun part, or at least, the most satisfyingly strategic part. The creation of the fake Instagram account was critical. I scoured his university's website, looked at typical student profiles, and researched common fraternity names. I settled on a persona, Chad Brochill, a seemingly generic, slightly obnoxious frat guy from his own school. He would never suspect me. A random frat brother was plausible, someone he wouldn't immediately associate with my quiet, bookish demeanor back in Willow Creek. I made sure the account had a few generic posts, a blurred party photo, a picture of the campus fountain, nothing too specific, just enough to look legitimate. The first contact was carefully orchestrated, designed to be sharp and precise, like a surgical cut. I typed out the initial message from Chad Brochill to myself, "Hey, I have proof your boyfriend's cheating on you." It was short, direct, designed to pierce his carefully constructed illusion of innocence and ignite his paranoia. I pressed send, my fingers steady, my heart a drum against my ribs. The moment he saw it, I could practically feel his panic radiate through the phone lines. He went from dismissive to agitated in seconds. "What are you talking about? Who is this?" He texted me frantically, his usual calm facade cracking. "Block them. Don't reply. This is crazy." I typed back, my performance worthy of an Academy Award. "What are you talking about? Who is them? Why would someone say that?" I feigned confusion, hurt, and a touch of indignation, mirroring his own tactics back at him. It was delicious, watching him squirm, knowing he was walking right into the trap. He spun a tale about a disgruntled ex-friend, a jealous classmate, anything but the truth. I just listened, offering sympathetic noises and asking questions that subtly pushed him further into his own web of lies. Then came the grand finale, the detailed message designed to break him. I crafted it carefully, weaving together every piece of information I had collected over those long, silent months. This wasn't just about exposing him. It was about making him feel exposed, vulnerable, as I had felt for so long. I typed out the name of the bar he frequented, the Rusty Mug, then the name of a girl he'd been seen with, Chloe, the one with the bright red hair and the nose ring. I added a detail about a specific night. Thursday 2 weeks ago, around midnight, you were both at the pool table. I mentioned his favorite coffee shop, the Daily Grind, and how he always ordered a double espresso with oat milk. I even included a reference to his distinctive blue hoodie, the one he wore religiously. "Stuff there's no way a stranger should have known," I typed, mimicking the frat bro's voice. "I see you, man. People talk. You're messy. She deserves to know the truth. The message was long, chillingly accurate, and utterly devastating. The ex's reaction was immediate and extreme. He called me in a panic, his voice thin with fear. Someone knows too much, Eleanor. They know everything. They know about Chloe. They know about the bar. Who is this? Are they watching me? His paranoia spiraled. He genuinely thought he was being stalked and followed, not realizing the stalker was merely an echo of his own careless actions, a digital reflection of his deceit bouncing back at him. A part of me recoiled at the depth of his fear, but a larger, colder part felt a profound, almost primal satisfaction. This was what justice felt like, quiet and precise, not a screaming match in a dorm hall. He started looking over his shoulder, canceling plans, his texts becoming increasingly erratic. He stopped going to the familiar spots, changed his routes to classes. He was a cornered animal, desperate to escape an invisible predator. The fake account sent one last chilling message, simple and effective. They say you confessed everything. Don't worry, I won't tell anyone who told me. That was the breaking point. He called me, his voice a ragged whisper of despair. Okay, Eleanor. It's true. All of it. The girls, the lies, the way I treated you. The gaslighting. I'm so sorry. Please, just tell whoever this is to leave me alone. I can't take it anymore. It wasn't a roar of victory, but a quiet, hollow exhale. The beast had been cornered, exposed not by me, but by the phantom of his own guilt. He actually went to campus police, convinced a ghost was haunting him, giving a full confession of his cheating and his fear of being followed. The audacity, the absolute, unadulterated irony of him seeking protection from a threat that was a direct consequence of his own actions, a threat his quiet, supposedly unsuspecting girlfriend, had orchestrated from 1,000 miles away. It was a complex moment, a mixture of vindication, exhaustion, and a strange sense of detachment. The game was over. The frat bro account went dark. No last taunt, no final message. Just a silent, digital fade into oblivion. Nothing ever came of his police report, of course, because there was no real stalker, no physical presence to catch. He still tries to reach out to this day with long, dramatic apologies and regrets, a torrent of desperate messages declaring his love, his regret, his promises of change. He painted himself as a victim, even in his confession, still trying to manipulate the narrative. I read them all, sometimes with a detached curiosity, sometimes with a flicker of the old anger, but mostly with a growing indifference. I never replied. I just hit block. That was the final, satisfying twist. He still believes there was a random frat guy, a shadowy figure of justice who exposed him. He still searches for an explanation outside himself. He still doesn't know that the random frat bro who exposed him was me, the whole damn time. The satisfaction was real, but it wasn't a cure-all. It was a temporary balm, not a complete healing. The revenge purged some of the bitterness, allowing for genuine healing to begin. The anger faded, replaced by a quiet wisdom. He no longer occupied any space in my mind. The emotional abuse had been a slow poison, seeping into my veins, making me question my own perceptions, my own worth. This act of quiet defiance was the antidote. It allowed me to reclaim my agency, to rebuild my sense of self on solid ground. I learned to spot the subtle tells of deceit, the insidious creep of gaslighting, not just in his behavior, but in the casual interactions of others. More importantly, I learned how strong I was, how capable of strategic thought, even when my heart was breaking. My focus shifted from his downfall to my own uprising. It was time to build, not just to dismantle. My boundaries became non-negotiable. I learned to trust my intuition, that quiet alarm bell that had been silenced for so long by his manipulations. I stopped trying to prove myself to others and started listening to the quiet strength within. I poured my energy into my studies, finding solace and strength in challenging myself intellectually, in mastering complex concepts. The meticulousness I'd applied to his downfall, I now applied to my own growth. I started volunteering at a local community center in Willow Creek, working with young women navigating difficult relationships. I didn't share my story publicly, but I listened intently, recognizing patterns, offering quiet, empathetic support. I became a silent advocate, not through public speeches, but through my choices, my unwavering self-respect, and my willingness to listen to others who were navigating similar challenges. I began to see the subtle threads of manipulation not just in my own past, but in the stories of friends, in the casual jokes people made about controlling partners. It fueled a quiet desire to understand, to prevent others from falling into similar traps. The experience didn't make me cynical. It made me discerning. It didn't make me a victim. It made me a survivor and eventually a quiet beacon of strength. My life in Willow Creek, while seemingly quiet, was brimming with new purpose. I wasn't defined by what he did to me, but by what I had done for myself. Reclaimed my story, my strength, and my unwavering belief in a future built on honesty and true connection. I was no longer haunted by his ghost. Instead, I was building a life filled with authentic relationships and genuine peace, leaving the echoes of his deceit to fade into the past, like a forgotten digital footprint.